Imagine a land so cold that your breath freezes mid-air, where winter temperatures plunge to minus 70 degrees Celsius and entire cities are built on ice that never melts. This is Siberia, a territory so vast it defies comprehension, stretching 13 million square kilometers across the eastern half of Russia. Most people think of Siberia as a frozen wasteland, an endless white void where nothing survives except cold. But that's only part of the truth. Hidden within this immense landscape are smoking volcanoes, turquoise lakes that hold more fresh water than entire countries, and forests so dense they form their own weather systems. There are cities here, real cities with glass towers and underground metros, where hundreds of thousands of people wake up each morning to temperatures that would kill an unprepared person in minutes. The story of Siberia begins with its size. Larger than the United States and Europe combined, it spans 11 time zones and contains nearly every type of terrain imaginable. Alpine meadows transition into volcanic fields. Glaciers feed rivers that carve through limestone cliffs, millions of years old, and beneath it all, permafrost, ground that's been frozen solid for thousands of years, holding the entire landscape in a state of suspended animation. At the heart of this frozen realm sits Yakutsk, the coldest major city on Earth. Nearly 300,000 people live here, in a place where winter lasts 8 months, and the mercury regularly drops below minus 50. The city disappears beneath fog during the coldest months, a thick veil created when moisture freezes directly out of the air. Above this ghostly shroud, the sun barely rises, hanging low on the horizon even at noon. Every building in Yakutsk stands on stilts, not for aesthetic reasons, but survival. The ground beneath is permanently frozen, and any heat from a building would melt the permafrost, causing the structure to sink and collapse. Walk through the city and you'll see entire apartment blocks elevated on concrete pillars, their foundations hovering above Earth that hasn't thawed since the last ice age. But Yakutsk isn't the coldest place in Siberia. That distinction belongs to Oymyakon, a village that recorded minus 71 degrees Celsius in 1924. The coldest temperature ever measured outside Antarctica. The name translates roughly to unfrozen patch of water, an ironic label for the coldest inhabited place on Earth. Fewer than 1,000 people live here, trapped in a valley where cold air settles and stays, blocked by surrounding mountains. At these temperatures, reality bends. Exhaled breath doesn't just fog, it crystallizes instantly, with a sound locals call the whisper of the stars. Metal becomes brittle and shatters like glass. Rubber tires freeze solid. Even fuel can gel in gas tanks. Yet life continues, shaped by necessity rather than comfort. Deep beneath this frozen hell lies treasure. Yakutia sits atop one of the richest diamond deposits on the planet, and at its centre is Mirny, a town built around a hole in the ground. The Mir mine stretches nearly a kilometre deep and more than a kilometre wide. One of the largest open-pit excavations ever created by human hands. For decades, miners pulled diamonds from this massive crater, stones that eventually glittered in jewellery stores from Paris to New York. The pit was abandoned in 2001 when it became too dangerous to continue. But the wound remains, a perfect circle carved into the Siberian landscape. The Lena River cuts through the heart of Yakutia, a massive waterway that flows north to the Arctic Ocean. Along its banks, nature has carved something extraordinary. Rising from the riverside are the Lena Pillars, towering limestone columns that reach over 100 metres into the sky. They look almost artificial, too perfect in their symmetry, like the ruins of some ancient civilization. But these structures are entirely natural, sculpted over 500 million years by wind, water, and time. Each pillar is a vertical timeline, its layers recording ancient seas and shifting climates. Stand at their base, and you feel impossibly small, dwarfed by formations that existed before the first animals crawled onto land. The pillars aren't just geological curiosities. They're a reminder that Siberia's story stretches back far beyond human history, to a time when this land was covered by warm, shallow seas. Few roads penetrate this part of Siberia. The Kolyma Highway is one of the exceptions. A gravel track stretching over 2,000 kilometres through emptiness. Locals call it the Road of Bones. And that name carries weight. The highway was built by prisoners during Stalin's reign. Forced labourers from the Gulag camps who died by the thousands in the construction. Their bodies, it's said, were buried directly into the roadbed, their bones becoming part of the foundation. Along this grim route lie ghost towns, settlements that sprang up during the Soviet era and died just as quickly when the state collapsed. Kardichan was one of them. A coal mining town carved into the mountains by Gulag prisoners in the 1940s. At its peak, more than 10,000 people lived here, extracting coal to fuel Soviet industry. Then in 1996, an explosion killed 6 miners. The government shut down the mines, told everyone to leave, and by the early 2000s, Kardichan was empty. Today it's a frozen snapshot of Soviet life. Abandoned apartments still filled with furniture, as if everyone simply vanished. The Kolyma Highway eventually reaches Magadan, a port city on the Sea of Okhotsk. From the outside it looks ordinary enough. Apartment blocks, a harbour, streets laid in neat grids. But Magadan was the gateway to the Gulag. the entry point for prisoners shipped here to work in labour camps scattered across the region. Thousands died here, starved or frozen while extracting gold and other resources. On a hill overlooking the city stands the Mask of Sorrow, a massive concrete monument erected in the 1990s. It's one of the few official acknowledgements of the suffering that built this corner of Siberia. Beyond Magadan, roads disappear altogether. The land fragments into the Chukotka Peninsula, the easternmost point of Russia. This is tundra country, where winters consume most of the year and summers flash by in weeks. During Soviet times, the state built mining camps here, flying in workers and resources. When the Soviet Union collapsed, many of these settlements were simply abandoned, left to decay in the Arctic wind. Anadyr, Chukotka's capital, is a splash of colour against the endless tundra. Apartment blocks are painted in bright yellows, blues and reds, a deliberate choice to combat the psychological weight of the long dark winters. But behind the colourful facades, life here is defined by isolation. Supplies arrive by plane or ship, and prices reflect the distance. A carton of milk can cost 3 times what it does in Moscow. On the northern coast, the city of Pevek clings to the shore of the East Siberian Sea. During Soviet times, 25,000 people lived here. Now, fewer than 5,000 remain. But Pevek is experiencing a renaissance of sorts, becoming a crucial stop on the Northern Sea route. The Arctic shipping lane that connects Europe to Asia. As climate change reduces Arctic ice, more ships are using this passage, cutting weeks off traditional routes. Pevek's port, once forgotten, is now strategic. A refueling point for vessels navigating waters that were impassable just decades ago. What strikes you most about these places isn't just the cold or the isolation. It's the persistence. People live here not because it's easy, but because it's home. Leaving Chukotka behind, the landscape transforms. The tundra gives way to something unexpected. Mountains rise from the Pacific, their peaks wrapped in clouds and volcanic smoke. This is Kamchatka, a peninsula dangling into the ocean, like Russia's forgotten finger, pointing toward Japan. It sits on the Pacific Ring of Fire, where tectonic plates grind beneath the surface, pushing magma upward through cracks in the Earth's crust. The result is a land of more than 300 volcanoes, 29 of them still active. The most imposing stands at the centre. Kluchevskaya Sopka. A nearly perfect cone rising over 15,000 feet. It's erupted dozens of times in recorded history, throwing ash plumes miles into the stratosphere, blanketing the surrounding forests in grey powder. The volcano doesn't sleep for long. Every few years, it reminds the region who's in charge. To the east lies another wonder, the Valley of Geysers. Accessible only by helicopter, it's one of the largest geothermal fields on Earth. Jets of boiling water blast skyward at irregular intervals, steam clouds rising from fissures in the ground. Mud pots bubble and spit. The air smells of sulphur. Everything here feels alive, restless, as if the land itself is breathing. Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky, the capital, sits in Avacha Bay, surrounded by volcanic cones on all sides. It's one of the oldest Russian settlements in the Far East, founded in 1740. As a supply base for explorers. Today, fishing fleets fill the harbour, their decks stacked with crab pots and nets. The city depends on the sea. But the real locals aren't human. Stellar sea lions haul themselves onto breakwaters and piers, massive bodies glistening in the weak northern sun. They bark at one another, competing for space, unbothered by the boats passing nearby. Each autumn, another spectacle unfolds. Salmon return from the Pacific, swimming upstream to spawn in the rivers where they were born. The rivers of Kamchatka run thick with them, the water seeming to boil as thousands of fish push against the current. And waiting for them are brown bears. They wade into the rivers, standing still as the salmon swarm past their legs. With a quick swipe, a fish is airborne, clamped in powerful jaws, devoured on the spot. The bears gorge themselves, eating until their bodies are fat enough to survive the long winter ahead. From Kamchatka, the land fractures into the sea. These are the Kuril Islands. 56 volcanic peaks stretched across 800 miles between Russia and Japan. They exist because of collision. Here, the Pacific Plate dives beneath the Okhotsk Plate, grinding and pushing magma upward. The result is a chain of volcanoes, some smoking, some erupting, all reshaping the land in real time. On Ornekotan Island lies the colossal caldera of Krenitsin. Inside it, a lake fills the crater, and in the middle of that lake rises a perfect volcanic cone. It's a landscape that seems imagined, almost impossible, yet it is real. sculpted by fire and water in violent succession over thousands of years. Farther south, near Paramushir Island, smoulders Abeko. Its eruptions aren't cataclysmic, but persistent. Ash and steam drift from the summit almost daily, coating nearby vegetation in a fine grey dust. For humans, survival on the Kuril Islands has always been complicated. Supply ships come when the weather allows, but storms often leave communities cut off for weeks. Yet for those who endure, the islands are magnificent. Untamed, unpredictable, and beautiful in their severity. To the west, Sakhalin stretches along the Pacific coast, almost 600 miles of ridges, rivers, and taiga. In the 19th century, Russia and Japan vied for control, dividing the island between them, swapping territories, redrawing maps. After World War II, the Soviets retook the southern part. Expelling Japanese settlers and reshaping towns and economy. The capital, Yuzhno-Sakhalinsk, is a Soviet city layered over older Japanese streets. Wide boulevards lined with Soviet apartment blocks give way to narrow lanes where wooden houses still stand. And just beyond the city, the Gorny Vozduk ski resort climbs into the mountains, offering slopes with sweeping views over the island. Sakhalin has beauty, often stark, sometimes haunting. None more so than the Aneva lighthouse. Built by the Japanese in 1939 on a lonely rock at the island's southern tip, it once guided ships through treacherous waters. For decades, it was manned by keepers who lived in isolation. Later, the Soviets automated it with radioactive power cells. Today, abandoned, it stands as a monument to the edge of the world, battered by waves and wind. Slowly crumbling into the sea. Russia's Pacific window, Vladivostok, is closer to Tokyo than to Moscow, yet bound to the west by a line of iron rails. The name means rule the East. Sounds like ambition, maybe arrogance. The city was founded in 1860 when the Russian Empire decided it wanted a foothold on the Pacific. A port, a fortress, a symbol that the empire's reach did not end with Siberia. During the Soviet era, Vladivostok was closed to foreigners. A a secret city hidden from the outside world. Only in 1992, after the Soviet Union fell, did the gates open again. The Golden Horn Bay curves into the city. Hills rise on every side, their slopes thick with apartment blocks. The Ruski Bridge, the longest cable-stayed bridge in the world, leaps toward Ruski Island. Where students and researchers now fill what was once a military zone. Vladivostok lives in contradictions. European in architecture, Asian in flavour. Beyond the city, the land crashes straight into the Pacific. The shoreline folds in like torn paper. Pines cling to rock faces, their roots locked into cracks. Waves roll in blue and green, slamming against stone. And in between those cliffs, something unexpected. Strips of pale sand hidden between walls of granite, with water so clear it looks tropical. For many, it's surprising. Siberia is usually imagined as cold, landlocked, and frozen. Yet here in summer, the water warms enough to swim. Sometimes brushing 70 degrees, just shy of the Mediterranean. The coves are small, often reachable only by footpaths or boats. No boardwalks or lifeguards, just untouched wilderness. This coast shows another face of Siberia. It is not endless snowfields, but a mix of forested mountains and a sea that can be surprisingly mild. And beyond the beaches and coves, another landscape rises. Just inland begins the Ussuri taiga. Larch and pine mix with oak and cedar. A tangle of undergrowth alive with insects and birds. The taiga here hides ghosts. The Amur taiga, largest of all big cats, stalks these forests. Fewer than 600 remain in the wild. Most of them here, stripes blending with shadow, paws silent on the snow. It is a predator built for power and patience. And it rules this land like nothing else. Alongside the taiga, another survivor moves in the undergrowth. The Amur leopard. Smaller, more elusive, and far rarer. Once on the edge of extinction with barely 30 left in the wild, it has made a fragile comeback under protection. Still, seeing one is nearly impossible. The forest hides them well, and they prefer it that way. Vladivostok is the last stop of the Trans-Siberian Railway, where tracks finally meet the sea. Nearly 9,300 kilometers of steel, running across 2 continents. It is the longest railway line in the world. 7 time zones stretched out across forests and rivers. A journey not of hours but of days. Construction started in 1891 under Tsar Alexander III, when Russia wanted to bind its empire together from west to east. Thousands of workers were sent into the wilderness. They cut through taiga, spanned rivers, laid track across permafrost. Progress was slow, brutal, costly. But by 1916, the line was complete, a ribbon of iron tying Europe to the Pacific. Without it, Russia's Far East would remain unreachable. With it, this remote region became part of the whole. The ride itself is an act of endurance. Moscow to Vladivostok takes a week, if you don't step off. The days blurring into nights. Deep in the north of Zabaikalsky Krai, where Siberia is supposed to be endless taiga, the land suddenly fractures into something unexpected. The rolling dunes of Chara Sands rise from the forest, glittering in the sun. Wind shapes ridges and hollows that look more like the Sahara. The dunes stretch for about 10 kilometers, surrounded on all sides by snow-capped peaks. Seen from above, the landscape is surreal. Taiga, mountains, and then this pocket of desert. As if dropped here by accident. Geology explains the riddle. During the last ice age, glaciers crushed rock into fine sediment. When the ice retreated, meltwater spread that sand across the plain. Over millennia, wind sculpted it into dunes. A fossil memory of the last glaciation. As we follow the Trans-Siberian to the west, the trees thin, the land opens. Steppe rolls. Buryatia begins. Domes of Orthodox churches stand beside golden roofs of temples. Buddhism, not orthodoxy, has deep roots in this land. The Datsans are its heart. Monasteries painted in red and green, their roofs curling against the sky. The Ivolginsk Datsan, founded in 1945, when Stalin was gone, and religion clawed its way back into daylight, became the home of Buddhism in Russia. Prayer flags snap in the wind, colours slowly bleaching under the sun. Wooden wheels spin endlessly, sending whispered mantras skyward. And then in the centre of Ulan-Ude, another monument rises. The largest Lenin head in the world. 19 tons of bronze. 8 meters high. It is hard not to see it as another kind of temple. Another faith, Soviet socialism, was its own religion. 2 different systems of belief, 2 different kinds of devotion. Siberia has many faces, frozen tundra, endless taiga, jagged mountains. But nothing prepares you for Lake Baikal, the world's deepest, oldest and clearest freshwater lake. A body of water so immense it feels like an inland ocean. On first approach, it looks calm, almost serene. Blue stretching to the horizon. Cliffs rising from the water. But beneath that glassy surface are chasms over 1,600 meters deep. Rifts formed by the earth itself tearing apart. In winter, the ice thickens, but it's not solid. Cracks run like lightning, air bubbles are trapped under the surface. Cathedrals are built along the shore. Caves where waves once broke against cliffs, now sealed in crystal. Inside, icicles hang like organ pipes. Light filters through blue and green. Turning the walls into stained glass. Baikal is life too. Its waters are home to the Nerpa. The only freshwater seal species on Earth. Scientists still argue how it ended up here. Stranded in this inland sea. Lake Baikal already feels like another planet. But even in a place this vast, there's a centre of gravity, Olkhon. The largest island on Baikal. About 70 kilometers long. Dusty tracks cut through rolling hills. Villages are small. Wooden houses bleached grey by wind and sun. But Olkhon has a presence. You feel it before you even understand it. This is one of the sacred centres of the Buryat people. At Cape Birken, a jagged outcrop on the western shore, shamans once performed rituals. And today, prayer ribbons still flutter from poles. Travellers stop here and fall silent without quite knowing why. Life on the island is simple. There are no big hotels, no slick infrastructure, and cell service is patchy at best. But that's part of the appeal. Olcon feels unfiltered, stripped back as if the rest of the world hasn't quite caught up. The Yamal Peninsula is a flat, endless stretch of tundra locked in ice for most of the year. Temperatures here easily drop below -50 degrees and the sun can vanish for months. Most people would call it unlivable. For the Nenets, it's home. They are nomads moving with the seasons across Yamal, following the migrations of their reindeer herds. The animals are everything. Transport, food, clothing and shelter. A Nenets camp rises in the form of chums, conical tents of reindeer hide. Life here is stripped to its essentials after brief stops. Families dismantle their temporary homes, load everything onto sleds pulled by reindeer, and move on. There are no shortcuts, no backups, just knowledge passed down for generations and a stubborn resilience that makes the impossible ordinary. The Nenets don't live in the past. They live in the present more fully than most people ever do. On a map, Khanty-Mansiysk looks remote, a dot in the endless sweep of Siberia. In reality, it's a place that shouldn't even exist. A modern city built in the middle of nowhere. It began as a small settlement of the Khanty and Mansi people, indigenous reindeer herders. Then came the Soviets in the 1960s. They struck oil, everything changed. What was once a quiet village became the capital of Russia's black gold boom. Today, Khanty-Mansiysk is wealthy and polished, almost surreal against the wilderness around it. A strange mix of frontier and luxury. Streets glow with neon in winter, while outside the city limits, hunters still track elk through the snow. Siberia hides landscapes that don't fit into the clichés of endless forest and frozen wasteland. The Putarana Plateau is one of them. It lies far above the Arctic Circle, locked away from roads and cities. A place so remote that even most Russians have never seen it. Towering basalt plateaus stretch to the horizon, broken by deep canyons and hundreds of waterfalls. In fact, some geographers call it the land of 10,000 lakes and 1,000 waterfalls. The numbers aren't poetry, they're an understatement. about 250 million years ago, volcanoes here flooded Siberia with lava, layer upon layer, until the land rose into this massive basalt plateau. Later, glaciers carved it, rivers sliced through it, and time left behind a labyrinth of gorgeous cliffs and steps. There are no highways to the plateau. To get in, you fly by helicopter or trek for days through taiga and tundra. It's one of the last places where true wilderness doesn't just exist, it dominates. In the western Sayan Mountains, Irgaki National Park covers nearly 350,000 hectares of peaks, lakes, and deep taiga. It's often called Siberia's Yosemite. The comparison makes sense. Granite walls, glacial valleys, high-altitude meadows. The geology is similar as well. Like Yosemite, these mountains were carved by ancient glaciers that once filled the valleys. Lakes are everywhere. In total, there are more than 600 of them scattered through the park. Many sit at high altitude, fed by snowmelt, and remain icy cold, even in July. Among Irgaki's peaks, Parabola is the most recognizable. The name says it all. A perfect granite arch split into two vertical towers. What makes Parabola unique is the symmetry. Few natural formations look so deliberate, so designed. It rises to about 2,200 meters, sheer and smooth with cracks that climbers follow to the top. One of the park's strangest sights is the Hanging Stone, a giant boulder perched on a cliff ledge, placed here by a massive glacier. Just outside Krasnoyarsk, something unexpected rises from the forest. Giant pillars, twisted and cracked. Locals call them the Stolby, the Krasnoyarsk pillars, and they've been here long before Siberia had a name. Geologically, the monoliths are cousins of the Lena pillars, ancient intrusions of syenite magma that cooled underground 450 million years ago. What's left are towers and boulders. Some stand nearly 100 meters tall, worn smooth in places, jagged in others. Each rock has a name, a story. Grandfather for the old guardian, tiger for the stripes, centurion for the central sentinel. For more than a century, locals have been climbing them, often with no ropes and no gear, just hands and nerve. They call themselves Stolbists, and in Soviet times they built a whole underground culture here. Part sport, part rebellion. The authorities didn't always approve, but Stolby gave people a way to escape. The forest was freedom, the pillars were a challenge. And in Khakassia, another mysterious geological formation takes shape. Not the jagged verticality of Stolby. Something older, softer, the sunduki. The name means chests in Russian. Locals call them that for the box-like silhouettes that dot the horizon. Where stolbi are dramatic and vertical, sunduki are horizontal, deliberate, layered. Granite and sandstone sit in plains and shelves. Tectonic pressures lifted the land, and millions of years of erosion carved the shapes we see today. Wind polished the surfaces, frost split layers, water seeped into cracks, smoothing edges. Archaeologists and shamans say that the sunduki are ancient ritual sites, places where people came long before written history. Carvings, petroglyphs, and stone altars are scattered along the formations. Some say spirits inhabit the chests, invisible but perceptible. And pilgrims even today leave small offerings, coins, ribbons, out of respect or superstition. South of the Siberian plains, where the land begins to fold in on itself, the Altai Mountains rear up. The spine of Asia, formed by the violent collision of tectonic plates. Snow crowns their ridges, even in summer. This is where the great Siberian rivers are born, one of the least populated regions on Earth. The mountains don't unfold all at once. They reveal themselves slowly, curve by curve, and the best way to meet them is on the Chuisky Tract, a ribbon of asphalt that cuts through one of the most spectacular landscapes in Russia. For more than 600 kilometers, the road winds its way to the Mongolian border, linking villages and valleys. The Chuya River itself is constant company, rolling alongside the highway. Every turn shows something new. One moment you're driving through open steppe, the next you're entering a canyon. Then it opens again into alpine meadows. The peaks in the distance shine white year-round, and among the snowy summits hides the Aktru Glacier, a frozen river stretching from the ridges. It doesn't look alive at first. Ice is still shimmering solid, but listen. A low groan rumbles from deep within. Cracks form without warning. Crevasses gape like open mouths. The glacier is moving, as it has been for thousands of years. Aktru isn't about size. The glacier stretches about 8 kilometers, not enormous by global standards. But here, among the jagged Altai peaks, it dominates everything. In the valley below, a hidden crater of turquoise water is surrounded by evergreen pines. Geyser Lake. It doesn't erupt like Yellowstone. Instead, it bubbles almost imperceptibly, as if the earth is breathing slowly. The surface ripples in subtle waves, concentric circles forming and fading. The colour of the lake is a shade of blue that doesn't exist in most of the world. Intense and electric. The geology, however, is simple. Geyser Lake sits in a depression formed by tectonic shifts and volcanic activity. Hot water rises from deep below, meeting cold snowmelt, creating a dynamic system that bubbles and steams. The Chuisky Tract crosses the Altai, but we're going to leave tarmac behind for a while and follow a narrow gravel road that weaves through the hills. It climbs, passes small villages, and then suddenly drops into the heart of one of the wildest valleys in Siberia, the Katu-Yarik Pass, a giant scar carved into the mountainside. A switchback road that falls nearly a kilometre from the plateau above. At the top, the view steals your breath. Cliffs falling away into air. The river snaking through the valley. Katu-Yarik isn't polished or paved with convenience. 10 hairpin turn zigzag down the impossible slope, carved into loose rock and earth. Below lies the Chulishman Valley, a place so remote and untamed it feels like stepping into prehistory. Past riverside, meadows and clusters of birch trees, the landscape takes a turn for the surreal. The Acherum stone mushrooms, one of the Altai's strangest creations, look almost man-made. Tall stalks of earth and stone, some 10-15 metres high, capped with slabs that seem too heavy, too precarious to sit there for long. But they've been here for centuries, maybe thousands of years. Rain and wind carve the soft soil away, but the harder boulders protect the columns beneath, leaving these improbable shapes standing. The Acherum mushrooms aren't unique in form. Hoodoos exist in deserts from Utah to Cappadocia. But here in the Altai, they feel different. The greenery of the valley, the icy river, the weight of Siberian silence make them less like curiosities and more like mysteries. Follow the Chulishman north, and the river slows, widens, and then suddenly becomes a sea. This is Teletskoye Lake, the largest lake in the Altai and one of the deepest in all of Siberia. Locals call it the Little Baikal, and indeed it feels endless. Nearly 80 kilometers long and more than 300 meters deep, Teletskoye lies like a mirror between mountain ridges. The water is dark, cold, and impossibly clear, fed by more than 70 rivers and streams. There's something ancient about the lake. Scientists say it formed at the end of the last ice age. But standing at the shore, history doesn't feel scientific. It feels mythic. The Altai people tell stories of spirits living in the depths, of guardians who watch from beneath the surface. If Terletskoye is the Altai's inland sea, vast, deep and mysterious, then Lake Kucherla is its jewel, smaller, hidden, harder to reach, but radiant in a way that catches you off guard. The colour doesn't look real. The lake shifts between milky blue and vivid green depending on the mood of the sky. Yet there's no magic. The water is fed by glaciers heavy with rock flour. Suspended in the water, it scatters light, turning the lake into a mirror of turquoise. At just over 7 kilometers long, Kucherla isn't large, not compared to Terletskoye. But what it lacks in size, it makes up in intimacy. Above, the ridges of the Khartoum Range frame the horizon, the white peaks that never lose their snow. And at its heart rises Mount Belukha, the highest mountain in Siberia, the crown of the Altai, and for many, something more than just a peak. Belukha is massive. Twin summits, both over 4,500 meters, are linked by a razor ridge. The glaciers spill down its sides. Rivers of ice that feed the Khartoum River below. The great artery of the Altai. Legends say Belukha is the gateway to Shambhala, a hidden paradise, a realm of wisdom and peace. Shamans believe the mountain is a center of spiritual energy, a place where heaven and earth connect. The Altai is full of contrasts, glaciers and turquoise lakes, sacred peaks and Martian hills, and maybe that's the point. Siberia defies expectations at every turn. It's not just one thing, it's a continent of extremes folded into a single region, from the volcanic fire of Kamchatka to the frozen silence of Yakutsk. From the marble caves of Patagonia to the stone mushrooms. Of Akharam, each corner reveals something unexpected. Something that doesn't quite fit the mental image most people carry. This land has been shaped by ice and fire, by isolation and endurance. The people who live here, whether in modern cities or nomadic camps, have learned to adapt to conditions that would break most others. They've built lives in places where nature dictates the terms. And in doing so, they've become part of the landscape itself. Siberia doesn't ask to be understood. It simply exists. Vast and indifferent, beautiful and brutal, in equal measure. A reminder that the world still holds places where human ambition meets its limits. Where the wild remains wild, and where the horizon stretches farther than any road can follow. Standing at the edge of Siberia, looking out across landscapes that shift from desert to tundra to volcanic peaks, you realize something fundamental. This isn't just a cold place at the top of the map. It's a world unto itself, diverse beyond comprehension, shaped by forces so vast they dwarf human timescales. The statistics tell part of the story. 13 million square kilometers, 11 time zones, temperatures that swing from -70 to +35 degrees Celsius. But numbers can't capture what it feels like to stand beneath the Lena pillars or watch a brown bear catch salmon in Kamchatka. They can't convey the silence of Lake Baikal in winter or the roar of Kluchevskaya Sopka erupting. What makes Siberia remarkable isn't just its extremes, it's the persistence. Life thrives here despite conditions that seem designed to prevent it. Tigers hunt in forests where winter lasts 8 months. Seals swim in fresh water 1,000 miles from any ocean. People build cities on permafrost and call them home. The infrastructure tells its own story. The Trans-Siberian Railway. 9,300 kilometers of steel, connecting 2 continents. The Road of Bones, built by prisoners who became part of its foundation. Cities like Yakutsk and Norilsk existing in places that should be uninhabitable. Each one a testament to human determination. For better or worse. But perhaps what's most striking is how much remains unknown. Even today, vast stretches of Siberia are barely mapped. The Putarana Plateau, accessible only by helicopter. Valleys in the Altai, where roads don't reach. Coastlines along the Arctic Ocean, where ships pass but few people live. In an age of satellite imagery and GPS, Siberia still holds mysteries. The wild remains wild here in ways it doesn't elsewhere. The Amur tiger stalks forests with no fences. Volcanoes erupt without warning. Glaciers advance and retreat according to rhythms measured in centuries. Human presence, even in cities of hundreds of thousands, feels temporary against geological time. This is what Siberia offers. Not comfort, not convenience, but perspective. A reminder that the planet operates on scales beyond our control. That beauty and brutality often occupy the same space. That the most memorable places are rarely the easiest to reach. The sun sets differently here, casting long shadows across landscapes that have witnessed ice ages come and go. And somewhere in that vastness, life continues, adapting, enduring, thriving against odds that would seem impossible anywhere else.